We're here. Okay, good evening everybody, good evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stuart Harris, co-head of Cinematography. Now, this evening's going to be a little bit different, but what I want to do is I want to start with 4 words, okay? So these 4 words were given to me by an American music promoter, and I asked him the secret of his success, and he said these 4 words. And if you were at the grad fiction when we announced grad fiction earlier on this year, you would have heard these 4 words, and the 4 words are: together everyone achieves more. Stunned. Okay, so you get it in a minute. Roger and James, Team Deakins, welcome, and let's have a welcome for Team Deakins. Okay. So it's called Team Deakins, and I know you all know about Roger, but you don't know about James. How many of you listen to the podcast? So you do know a little bit about James. But what you do need to know is that if you want Roger, you need James. So I know that, and I know that they are givers. They give, they don't take, they give. They give us so much whenever we want them to come here. If they're free, they come, or they'll meet students, whatever. They are just so open at doing it. So it's great that it's really lovely you're both here tonight. Sure. Now, I want them to understand a bit more. So James Deakins, where were you born?
Englewood, New Jersey in the States.
And what did your mum and dad do?
My dad was an electrical engineer, and my mom worked in the state later on when we were older.
Okay, and then how did you get into the film industry?
I studied Latin and Greek in college, not planning to do anything with it, but while I was in college I started doing multimedia shows and decided I wanted to tell stories. When I got to New York, I started working in a film lab and sort of got stuck there for 4 years, but it taught me so much about film. And then after I did one stint as a post super, which was kind of like working in a lab but being the customer, so I was always right, so there was that. But then I started being a script supervisor, and then that got me down my path.
Okay, so when did you meet?
We met in 1991 on Thunderheart. Roger was shooting and I was scripting.
Had you ever met him before?
No. I called up the assistant cameraman on the job because I knew him and said, "What's this guy like?" And he said, "You were pretty good."
We had mutual friends, because some of the people I was working with, James knew better than I did.
Yeah, from being in New York.
But you were working a lot in America, weren't you, at one time?
I had started working in America then. That was like...
You'd done Homicide and Barton Fink.
Barton Fink, Homicide. That was like the 3rd film, and I just bought a place in LA, in Santa Monica.
And so from you as an East Coast person, you went to the West Coast.
Well, I had just moved to LA. We
were shooting in South Dakota. Where we met, and we found out I just moved to Santa Monica and bought a little house in Santa Monica, where we still are. And James had moved from New York, and she was living, I don't know, 200 yards down the street on the edge of Venice in Santa Monica.
So that was it.
So it seemed like, we met in South Dakota, and it was destined to be.
Love at first sight.
Well, we worked the whole job as friends, and then at the very end, Roger asked me out, and then 4 months later we were married, and that was like 33 years ago. So.
In Hong Kong, and our best man was Chris Doyle.
Now you know everything about us.
Yeah, there was nothing else to tell. And he was drunk. Oh, sorry.
Well, that goes without saying. No, sorry.
Oh, Chris was wonderful. We got married in Hong Kong because I was doing a seminar there, and we just took the chance. It was great.
So to rush forward at this, so you'd already been working with the Coen brothers. Okay, so now let me ask you something. Who chooses the scripts, really?
Oh, we talk about
Oh,
it.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
we
Yeah.
go back and forth, and
And what wins? How do you win?
we pretty much have similar taste, I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, what wins is something you can feel passionate about doing.
Mm.
But I mean, you know, obviously, if it's Joel and Ethan, it's like a no-brainer. You're going to do it.
Yeah.
I kind of
Yeah.
wondered about Sicario because of all the drug trading and everything, but it was Denise, so
Yeah.
I figured
Yeah, you
it
wonder
would be
about
good.
things.
Yeah.
So you know, you might love a script, but the director might have a different opinion about it than
Mhm.
you. So you kind of need to meet with a director if you don't know them and try and figure it out. You know,
Mm.
if it's going to work.
And the thing about you is, in your career, I mean, I'm not going to read them all out, but look, I mean, it's just, and everyone's a winner. You,
Not everyone, but
more or
some of the
less.
ones I like most didn't win.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the box office.
And just something that intrigues me is that the last time I met you, it's a long time back now, you hadn't won an Oscar, and now you've got 2 Oscars.
And he's a different guy, right? No.
But that photograph's worth any Oscar.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So that goes back to the beginnings, the very beginning. If I want to get very clever, I know that you wanted to be a documentary cinematographer, didn't you?
At the very beginning, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a mess. And I went to art college because I didn't want to work. And then I discovered photography and dreamed about being Tim Page or somebody and going to Vietnam as a photojournalist, I suppose. I don't know. And then a friend at art college said this place was opening up. And I thought, well, the photographs I take could speak and live documentaries. So that's what I felt when I came to the film school.
But when you came to this film school, it wasn't 2 years then, was it? It was a longer course, completely different to how
It was between 3 and 6, depending on if people wanted to stay and hang out. It was very loosey-goosey.
now. How many films did you make here?
I made a couple of my own films. I made a documentary and then sort of like a little drama. Oh, a couple of little dramas I made actually. And then I shot something like 15 films for other students. So quite a lot, really, yeah.
And those directors, did you go on to work with them later on?
In part, a couple I worked with later, yes. A couple. And there was Mike Radford, who was in the first year's intake. I didn't really know. I mean, we talk now and again, obviously, but I didn't work with him while I was at the film school. But after I left, he sort of established himself, and I started working with him. So he was instrumental in my career, really, getting into feature films.
From the day you walked out of here till you got going, how long would you say that took?
Well, I mean, got going. I mean, I'd like probably a few months before I got a job, but then I got odd little things doing industrial documentaries or arts programs, and it just gradually built up. And then my big break was my big break was doing a round the world yacht race for ATV, a documentary.
How long did that take?
It was a 9-month sort of voyage, and so the job was a bit longer than that because I had to prep equipment to take on the yacht and stuff. Yeah.
So once again, going fast forward, the whole idea of Team Deakins seems to me quite a brilliant one, because it leaves you to concentrate on lighting, but it leaves you to look after what's going on. How does that work?
Well, just from the very beginning, when we're deciding whether to do a script or not, we talk about the script, and if we decide to go forward, we meet with the director together to see if there's any pitfalls, and then we, when we start, I tend to talk a lot to the visual effects people, because oftentimes visual effects people want to shoot something a certain way that makes it easier for them, like green screen or blue screen, but that's not necessarily the way that Roger wants to shoot it. And I know what Roger wants to do, so I talk to them because I know a lot technically and sort of compromise with them and say, well, what about this and what about this, and try and keep that relationship good between Roger and the visual effects department.
And it's all the other departments as well. I mean, basically we're doing a similar thing, and James is doing more of the coordination with production and other departments. I mean, the special effects, but it's also production department and
costume
and art department in certain things, and just the logistics of stuff, and also the rest of our crew, electricians and grips and pre-riggers and stuff. It's about coordinating all the, in pre-production and during the shoot, just making sure that the equipment's been ordered by the production, because sometimes they try and cut costs and, I forgot to order that.
They do that to you as well.
Yeah. So it's all that. So you've really got to keep an eye on it, especially if like on Empire in the last film, the schedule's changing for various reasons. Then you've got to kind of keep a handle whether you've got the steady cam coming in for a certain day or the crane or whatever, So there's a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and also during the shoot, when Roger really wants to focus on the scene that we're doing that day, production has a lot of questions about what's coming next week, and do we need this, do we not need that, and so they can talk to me and they not bother Roger, whose eye is on the camera anyway.
Right.
Okay. I mean, because I'm operating, so it's like I am
busy,
busier than a lot of cinematographers.
How do you find that now? I mean, directors live in Video Village. How do you get on with that? Oh, you look who's smiling.
We're on camera, aren't we? I think I'll say I think it's disrespectful to the actors more than anything, and I find it slows things down. I like to be on a set where things are moving. I like to work fast. I like to light fast. I like to do takes fast, so that you once you've got into the feel of a move, it's death for me, but I'm sure it's for the actors as well. Just to stop for 20 minutes before you do another take. You just want to keep in the rhythm, and so I'm not a big fan of video assist, really.
And prep-wise, how much prep would you say? For instance, if you go back to the Coen brothers, how much prep would you have before the shoot?
It depends on the film, really.
It depends on the film.
We had so much on 1917 from August, and then we started shooting in April, so we had a long period of prep. But there was a lot of testing to do and everything. But
unlike the Big Lebowski, we came back from Morocco because we were on Kundun and it had gone way over, and we came back. I think we had 2 weeks. We came back just before Christmas, and the Coens were very nice. They just pushed it off a little bit, but we started quite soon after we were back
Recording in progress.
New Year. So,
and when the movie finishes, grading. How does that go about these days? What happens in grade? I mean, I know how you grade a film. We all do, but how much time do you get? How long did 1917 get, for instance?
Well, not exactly, because the thing is, you could do it so quickly, but nowadays you're always waiting for visual effects, because visual effects shots aren't always finished.
Yeah.
So you have to still be involved in the grading to see that shot works in whatever scene it's going in.
It's changed a lot, because like the first DI was Oh Brother Where Art Thou, and that took literally 12 weeks, because it was a spirit data cine, nothing was being laid down of a reel until you'd finished all the timing of it. So if we were like just about to the last shot in a reel and the power went out, we would lose that whole reel, and it happened a couple of times.
So many times, yeah.
And so we'd have to go back and start again. It was a very weird process. Of course, that doesn't happen now. They're automatic saves, and they can do it. Yes. But So that was 12 weeks. I mean, now, yeah, I mean, we could time it as 7 or 8 days work, really. But you're waiting for effects, and you're waiting maybe for a final cut, because you sometimes start graining before the cut is completely signed off on.
Okay, so now you went from film to digital. You know, we still shoot film here because it's a great way of teaching people. And they're also, this generation, in my opinion, kept film going. My generation, or our generation, just rolled over. They didn't. What's your
roll over?
Well, when I say, I don't think we put up enough of a fight. I mean, we lost.
Why would you want to fight?
Because we lost Fuji, and all we got left with was Kodak. It's tragic in a way.
Oh, I don't know about Fuji. Yeah, it was tragic when Agfa went.
Well, there you go.
I was a lot time earlier.
Do you miss it?
No.
Not at all.
You know, nowadays the problem with shooting film is there isn't the
you don't have the
infrastructure.
infrastructure, so it's you can't really,
The good technicians are gone from Kodak.
Yeah.
The labs,
Some of them.
a lot of the good technicians have gone to digital. So when you have a problem, because we have shot film here or there, it's just extraordinarily hard.
Difficult, yeah. I think, I don't miss it, because I say I don't like video assist, but I do like the fact that it brings you closer to the director and everybody else in terms of what you're doing and trying to achieve together. I was never one of those people that thought, I've got this camera, this black box that is this mystery, and I'm creating something in this black box that nobody will see until dailies. I never went with that. I think the more that everybody can be included in all the processes of making a film, the better. So I in that sense, I don't miss film.
Because when you have digital and you have a calibrated monitor on the set, you can show the director exactly what they're getting. You're not describing it, they're seeing it. So that's more inclusive.
And I don't miss the sickness I felt going to dailies in the morning, worrying whether it would be all right or not.
But I think it's really important to learn on film because you learn exposure better.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people who've learned on digital are a little they're kind of aiming at the exposure, and it's not quite right. I've seen it. And while you can fix it afterwards, I think it's so much better to start with a right exposure to begin with.
Okay.
I mean, I don't work any differently on digital than I did on film.
It's just
I mean,
a tool.
I still work with a light meter and use my eyes, and I don't, I don't work any differently.
That's really interesting to hear. So you don't, what happens a lot here is that we won't get too technical, but I remember shooting a black and white film some years back, and what you're saying about laboratory is very interesting because the men in sandals that knew what to do with black and white all disappeared. And I know what you're saying because that's, I just fought for so long to get a look. It was so hard. Whereas now in the digital world, it's there, it's good, but they love to experiment. Anyway, it's enough of me talking. I think it's time that we spoke to some of you. I'm sure you've got loads of questions. And there you are, there's the first person. Where are you going, Cody?
A little microphone here. Where are we going?
There he is.
Hi, that's Val. My name's Anthony. I study documentary, and we on the course we also, apart from being directors, we're also a lot of the time we're self-shooters.
Just to keep you away.
We can hear you.
So we don't get the credit of cinematographers, I guess, because we don't get the live training, but we do learn a lot about capturing the image. And since you have started in documentary, I was curious, especially from someone who's always operating a camera, how has that shaped you as a cinematographer and a storyteller? Your first experience?
I think everything, all your life experience shapes you, but just in terms of the camera, documentary is, that's been very much influenced the way I work now, absolutely.
But how can you say, what has that influenced?
I'm actually going to do the
the way
sparkling water here.
You shape an image, choose the light, like the way you work.
I don't know if it's about the light so much as just where you put yourself relative to something that's happening in front of you, you know. And I mean, in a documentary, you're obviously doing it in a very instinctive, instant sort of way, reacting to what's happening in front of you. And on a feature film, obviously, you can see a rehearsal more than once, and you can analyze it and be a bit more thoughtful about it, or have more time to think about it. But even on a feature, you've got to be quite quick in the morning. You might come to the set in the morning, and the actors come and do the scene once, and then you're expected to figure out with the director how you're going to shoot it. So I think documentary was a wonderful learning process for me, learning to go with my instincts and just to practice, really. Yeah. I've never
So
done.
we should repeat the question so other people
How do
can
I
hear
feel about shooting in front of a green screen without knowing what's going to be there? I've never done it. Never done it. Not interested. Sorry, but I'm not. I'm not interested. I mean, you know, obviously we've been approached about films that are that kind of shooting where you're in a stage with a green screen and you've just got the actors and maybe a bit of a set, but I'm just not interested in it.
The actors don't like it either,
No.
because they've got nothing to react against. And I think a lot of times you can see that in a movie. You can say, oh, this must have been blue screen because it's kind of dead.
But I mean, we're just talking about documentaries. That's the world I come from. I want to relate to the real world. Okay, it's actors creating a scene, but it's still relative to me, to the real world. I don't want to work in virtual sets. I mean, we've worked on animation, which is fine. The whole thing is then that you're creating a world, you know, totally artificially, which is interesting. But I'm not interested in working on a stage with a blue screen and not relating to what the environment is around the actors. That to me, it doesn't make any sense.
We were talking about this just before we came over. Actually, we were talking about, you know, the rooms that have just screens in them, and you were saying that's. But also, what was very interesting is that you would love to go back to making smaller films, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would. Because I think because I'm saying that because I think the films that I've seen of late have been the smaller films, and mainly they've been European films or Russian films. That's just my personal
It's
preference,
really about
taste,
story,
you know,
though,
it's about
too.
story.
Yeah.
I mean, the bigger movies seem a bit empty to me, frankly, or they seem artificial because they're so effects heavy. You know.
Interesting.
But it's just, I'm not saying one thing's right or wrong. That's just my
Yeah.
personal taste and where I come from.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Sam, a screenwriting student.
Hey.
When you get a sort of new script on the desk and you haven't had that conversation yet, what are the first sort of things that you're thinking about when you're reading it? Is it about how you connect to the story emotionally, or is it about sort of the opportunities to do something new, or is it kind of a mix of everything?
The first.
With
No, it's just like if you read a novel, you know, what grabs you, what affects you, what emotionally moves you, what do you feel it's...
And do you believe the characters? Because
Believe the
sometimes in a
characters.
script there needs to be a character change, but it's written in such a way that it happens too quickly. And so you think, well, that doesn't really work. So you're looking to see if you believe the story and that it moves you.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to do films that are different and challenging on a technical level, but that's secondary to actually... I feel you put so much into a film that you need to believe it and have a passion for it. So that really comes from the content, not from the style, you know, that or the location. It might be seductive if a film is shooting in sort of wonderful locations around the world, like a Bond movie, but unless the script's something, then why do it? And the fact is, the Bond movie we worked on shot in the sewers of London rather than around the world on beaches. So there you go.
But I think it's also that at least I look at a script and see if some of the essence of the story is actually in the description instead of in the action. So it's all very well to write the story, but that's a novel. You've got to look at it and go, wait, is this script really showing the audience? Because the audience is not going to read the description necessarily. And description is great to get an idea of where it's going, but you have to make sure that the action or the visual, as stated, is telling the story, if that makes sense.
So the difference between making small films and larger films, is there ever enough time?
There's never enough time.
No, there's no difference like that. There's never enough time, there's never enough
Enough money.
equipment, and never enough people, and the hours are always too long. No, that's a given. But with a smaller film, you don't have so many producers.
And so much studio
that
interference.
Kind of pressure on producing certain things.
Because there's less money involved. When there's a lot of money involved, then there's a lot of the studios and the financiers that are on set constantly because they've made a big investment.
And multi-cameras, what's your feeling about multi-cameras?
No.
Well, I mean, on the right scene, we were kind of nervous when Sam talked about doing a Bond movie, and he was on the phone and he said, "Don't put the phone down. I'm gonna when I tell you what I'm gonna do next." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm gonna do the next Bond movie." And I said, "I think I might put the phone down." Or something. I was joking, but he said, "No, let us talk about it." And I was really concerned because, it didn't really interest me to do an action film for the, and all that. But then, I read the script and talked to him, and he said, "No, we'll just approach it like we've worked together before, so it could be a single camera unless we're doing action scenes." And yeah, sometimes we had 11 cameras on first unit, and we had a second unit. Sure, we did, but most of the film shot single camera, and then we shot it like we shot Revolutionary Road or something, So that's the thing. It was really, again, and also the film was more about character than it was the action scenes.
Yeah.
Sure, there has to be action and all that, but it was fun. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I really felt it was worth making as a movie.
A lot of times it's this myth that it'll go faster if you have multiple cameras, but then there's always that discussion. Well, this is kind of crossing the eye line. Well, maybe we should put it over here. Oh, well, now we're seeing it in the background of the other shot. And you have all this, and you end up with two shots that are compromised, and you spend a lot of time talking about it, and they're not the best shots. So why not just take the two shots on a single camera, make them the best that they are, and they probably will take less time.
There's only time for one shot on a screen at a time. I mean, some people do multi-image, whatever, but you only use one shot at a time. I mean, when I first started working with Joel and Ethan, we wouldn't even shoot if they wanted, two people talking, they wanted a wide profile 2-shot or something. They would only shoot the lines they wanted it for. They would only shoot the
shoot to the cut.
Shoot to the cut. They were basically kind of cutting camera, and I thought it was great. Of course, latterly they would let the camera run for the wide shot and whatever, because they felt obviously they had a bit more flexibility and budget and everything else, and it only made sense. But they're still very. I mean, on Barton Fink, I could count the number of shots they didn't use, and it was probably 6.
Wow.
But you do find sometimes that you're in a situation where you're only going to use it at the end, but they do run the whole scene through, so the eye lines are all wrong in the beginning and everything's wrong. And they're doing it because it's easier for the actors to get to that point, but in a way it is a craft, and you do the best shot for those. If it's a situation where they're in different positions anyway, it just makes sense rather than, because you don't want to give bad eye lines and everything to the cutting room, because you never know which studio person's going to go in and say, "Oh, but that's a great shot."
I got a thing about lens length, right? Maybe I
One of your
Go
many
on.
things, but
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll go on about it too much, but I think the audience is thinking differently if you're here on a lens doing that, or you're here doing the same size on the face, but it's a longer lens. I think psychologically the audience is put in a different space to the character and everything else. So if you're shooting
multiple.
5 cameras on a conversation round a table, which a director kind of forced me to do once. Okay, so they're all on different lens lengths. So when it's cut together, the audience is going like this. Whose perspective are you on?
Yeah.
You know, you're on a 135. This character, James, is on a 50. I might be on a, I don't know. Then suddenly the audience is suddenly spatially in a different, a
So
very
you're jolting
strange
the
world.
audience out of
I
the
think so,
yes.
but then that's, you know, I mean, other people will use a zoom and say, well, we'll zoom in for a close-up. I've never done that.
And I don't, as I said, I don't want to get too technical, but tell me something else that intrigues
I'm not
me.
technical.
All right. Nor am I. Nor am I.
I'll talk technical.
Okay.
No, I'm
She's
kidding.
technical, yeah. James
Tell
is
me about,
technical.
why don't you like anamorphic?
The
I don't
flares,
really
for
feel
one
well with
thing.
it, yeah, but that's less of it. It's more, it doesn't feel like my eye somehow. I don't
So
see an animal.
large format would be okay, but not anamorphic.
Oh yeah, I mean, it shoot, you know, LF but anamorphic. Just I've never. But you know, I've never. We were going to do it on one film, Joel and Ethan. We were going to do this film, To the White Sea, and it seemed to make sense to shoot anamorphic because I wanted this like a Japanese kind of woodcut, or you know, a Japanese painting. That lack of perspective. I wanted the feel of, you know, Mount Fuji here, and as it was going to be Brad Pitt at one time staggering through the snow here, and elements. And I had this idea of the feeling that we could put elements together digitally or whatever, and create this feeling of a Japanese non-perspective world. And anamorphic seemed to fit that for some reason, but it never happened. So that was the worst. That's my worst memory of films
Film
that
not
never
working,
happened.
yeah.
But you're in great company, because when I was a little clapper loader, I worked on 2001. Mr. Kubrick.
You did?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, wow.
He completely detested anamorphic. That's why he shot 65.
Oh,
So
wow.
Yeah.
he hated anamorphic.
Mm.
Well, there you are then. I never knew that.
You're in
but
great
I'm
company.
glad. See, that's
You're in
not
great
bad company, is it?
I'm sure you must have questions. Yeah, look, the hands are up. There you go. Yes, sir, you. Shout out.
Stuart from VFX. When you did the sequel, 2049, how much were you influenced by the original cinematography in the first film?
Well, see, I never thought of it as a sequel, and that was one of the first conversations that we had with Denis. I said, "You look, if you think I can't do anything like Jordan Cronenworth, I don't work like that. What he did was brilliant. I'm not going to try and compete with that. If this is a sequel," I said, "I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't feel comfortable doing it." And he said, "No, this is a standalone film, rather like Sam had said about Skyfall, the Bond movie. It's a standalone film." So I never felt anything, any pressure or any connection to the original, other than that there was a story kind of connection. So and Denis as well. Denis was very much wanting to create his own world. It wasn't. We weren't relating to the original film at all in that sense visually.
Okay. Yes. Over there. Yes.
Tyler, sound student. James, earlier you said about how Coen Brothers scripts, like, kind of every time you get one, they just feel different and they speak to you both more than other writers. I was wondering, what do you mean exactly? In what way do Coen Brothers scripts just stand out for you both over any others?
Well, they have a very specific sense of humor, I would say, very dark sense of humor, and very, how do you do it? Filmic and How would you describe it? It's very.
They immediately put you in a world, and every script is a very different world, and we always find that really interesting. It's great to get one of their scripts in here, because you never know what you're going to read.
And it has its own logic.
Yeah.
Its own world logic.
I think the script for No Country for Old Men was one of the best I've ever read. I'd read the book, and then Joel said, we were talking about what he was doing next, and he said, well, we're writing this script, No Country for Old Men. And I said, are you going to direct it? And he said, oh, we don't know, we're just writing the script. And I said, you got to direct it, my God, you got to direct it. And thankfully they did, because they wrote a wonderful script, and I don't think anybody else would have directed it the way they did. That sort of balance.
It was interesting
but
too.
it was on the page, wasn't
Yeah.
it? You know, you could feel it.
When we got the script for Fargo, we read Fargo, and it's the boys. Okay, let's work with them. But I said, Roger, it's the character of whatever.
It was
his name
very
was.
hard. Yeah.
The
Bill Macy's
Bill
character
Macy's
was
character
like really
was horrible on the page. I mean, there was nothing redeeming about him. I said, how are you going to stick with a movie where there's this horrible main character? But of course they cast Bill Macy, and he's such a doofus that you felt so sorry for him. And it was really sort of a lesson in the power of casting and the director knowing something beyond the page, because on the page
we had actually asked them who they were thinking of casting, and it wasn't Bill Macy first off. And you think, well, I see, that's interesting, because when you put an actor in the script in that situation, it became slightly different. But then it turned out the original actor they'd written it for didn't do it for some reason, and Bill did it, and it was kind of wonderful.
No, I think that's the Barber movie, actually, where that guy was doing it. But
Where was the... There you are. Yes, you.
Hi there. I'm Luke. I'm a production sound mixer. Like a few of the people in here, I'm getting to the end of my time at NFTS now. So looking forward, I know there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment with the strikes happening, and often still get offered work for no pay. And so I guess my question is, I always try to say I can't pay my rent and exposure, get arrested. But do you think moving forward from here, should we still be accepting scripts because we love them when they're working for free, or should we always be kind of valuing our skill sets?
Oh, I think starting out, you just more or less... I wouldn't give any advice. I mean, I did most things that I was offered when I started out. I mean, some things I wouldn't do. I mean, I've not done commercials. I kind of like never felt comfortable doing commercials myself. Sorry, but I didn't. But it's personal choice,
Yeah, I mean, the thing about doing a lot of things is you really get your craft down too, because there's something when you're working on a movie, you have to do certain things kind of automatically so you could focus on the other things that matter. So that's what, even if it's free, that's what it's giving you. And also, if you do a free project, you're working with people that are also might go out and might actually get a job that pays, and they ask, oh, who's a good sound person that could do this, and they might recommend you. So it's about also getting your contacts further out.
Yeah, I think it's about being there for a time, so becoming a fixture somehow that won't go away, and then somebody eventually gives you a job. I don't know. The world's changed so much since I started out, since I left here. So I wouldn't begin to give advice really.
It's changed. It's heck of a... Yes.
My name's Amanda. Finish a movie and I think that was a good working environment.
I think what's really important with the producer role sometimes you end up with producers that are looking at the number on the page. Now, the budget is very important and it is your responsibility, but to me the producer role is to be there and to figure out with that number on the page how to help the director and the cinematographer achieve what they want to achieve. And we did a movie one time with very little money, and the line producer was very strong and very cheap. But you could go to him and you could say, you know, I need this. And he goes, why do you need that? And you explain, and he would say, well, can you do it this way? And sometimes yes, and oh, okay, let's do it that way. Sometimes no, but he would know that you needed it for a reason, and he checked, you know, to make sure that it was a good reason. But he was all about being able to put it on the screen. It's the producers that say, nope, that's just not in the budget, and you just have to say, well, then the budget's wrong because we're supposed to be doing this. So it's always keeping the intent of the movie in your head.
I think the thing that annoys me most sometimes is when you're hired to do a film by the director and the studio producer, whatever, and I hire people to work with me. Everybody's been hired for what they can achieve and accomplish. And if I'm working on a big movie like Skyfall or a small movie like Sid and Nancy, I'm working on that movie. I'm not asking for all the backup and all the equipment and all the extras I would have and need on Skyfall if I'm doing Sid and Nancy, you know. And it really upsets me when a producer doesn't think I know enough that I have to work within certain constraints, and also that the director does, in order and we work within those constraints together to create the best we can and fulfill the director's wishes best we can, knowing of the constraints. And I find that when a producer or a line producer in particular is second guessing what we're asking for or what my gaffer is asking for. I mean, we had a case, and it was recent, but I shouldn't go into it too much, but I had two sets that needed to be lit at the same time. So I needed two sets of lights. But I was told that the production couldn't afford two sets of lights. So in order to facilitate shooting and moving from one set to another, we had to hire a rigging crew over the night to move those lights from one set to the next set for the next day and back again. Okay, you tell me which was cheaper.
There's a question on Zoom.
Hello, on Zoom. In terms of production design, how soon do you meet with the designer, and how often is that communication between the departments?
Well, that depends on the film and the way we're working on the film, you know. I mean, sometimes the production designer is working with the director and scouting before I am. Like on Skyfall, Dennis Gassner went with Sam scouting places around the world before I did, and then I went by myself to catch up, and then we started talking and going back together. Whereas on Blade Runner, we were working with Denis Villeneuve long before Dennis Gassner came on. But that was just the way that, you know, different relationships and different situations and how it works. But I mean, I always make a real point of getting to know a production designer very early on. And I always want, especially, you know, it always happened with Joel and Ethan, that I would always be scouting right from the get-go. I mean, usually the production designer is talking to locations and organising that, but I would always make sure, you know, even if I wasn't being paid, I would wanted to be there early on so that I was involved in the decisions and knew more about what the director wanted to do and what the designer was thinking. I think it's that collaboration that is so important, and it's too late when you get late in pre-production, or some decision's been made. You're shooting on a location you haven't had a say in, and suddenly, oh my God, you can't light it or whatever because of some practical situation.
And also in prep, the art department is usually there too, so you kind of get into a habit of stopping by, because oftentimes you know of script changes that they don't know of that affect them, so you pop in and say, hey, did you hear this, or did you hear that, or how's this set going? And you keep that communication going, because you are, part of prep is sharing information.
Yeah.
On something like Blade Runner, did you get models of the set to look at?
And some of them, that's really important on some sets. I mean, on Blade Runner, it was more virtual models, not actual physical models. On 1917, for instance, we made up a physical model of the ruined city, so that we could figure out where our lights were going to go in terms of the
flares.
The flares were like this sort of thing. They were a little kind of wire stand with an LED on, and we could move them around and change the design of the ruins so the shadows would fall, in the right way, and the action would be lit. And then I just used a 60-watt bulb on a stand to mimic the church, the burning church, so I could see where the shadows were going to go on the set they were going to build, and the whole scale of it, And so, sometimes models are really important for that. When we did on Skyfall, for instance, when we did the office building, the glass thing, which originally was a location in Shanghai they had scouted, and I went to see by myself and said to Dennis, when I got back from Shanghai, I said, can we do that on stage? Because if it were all glass, or if there were more glass, and if it was on stage, I could have so much more control over the... And Dennis said, I don't know why we don't. So then we concocted an idea and went to Sam and said, we think we should do this on stage. And then Dennis and the art department built a model and showed how the glass would work if we had these big screens, big LED screens with images on. And what they used, they just used iPads and put them in place where the screens were going to be, so you could see how the reflections were going to work in the glass, with a little lipstick camera. So, those sort of things kind of give you a much better idea of how things will work, or reassures you that your idea will work,
I mean, lately they're doing more and more previs, but previs can be difficult at times because they're using a 69mm lens or something.
38 and a half.
Yeah,
or
right.
It
doesn't fit at all, and you don't want people to get too married to it because it's never going to look like that.
So storyboards. So, my background mostly was in commercials, so everything would come in a storyboard.
Right,
How do you find storyboards?
I love storyboards, but I don't want to be stuck with them. I love storyboards because it's just a way of you and the director just kind of focusing in on the scene and the important aspects of the scene, or the perspective you want to take on the scene. Like doing the storyboards for 1917, we had to figure out the shot before we did anything and before we built a set. But it was wonderful, the process of just creating the shot and drawing it out.
I often found that there's not a lens been invented for some of the drawings that you would get, so you could, it was a guy.
Well, you don't really take that too seriously.
Oh, it's funny, I worked with Terry Jones, the Pythons years ago, and he would come in with his little sketches, and I'd say, look, let's have this shot, and there would be like 6 people sitting around a table, but in his drawing you could see 2 eyes on everybody. And I couldn't quite figure out how that was going to work, but because he was, cartoonist and all that, he'd drawn everybody so you could see their eyes.
But when storyboards are used well, they're just a method of learning the
Yes.
script, and then
Yeah.
you go to the set and you see what happens, and you know the script so well, you can bounce off of them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're
for
sort of-
commercials, you need them because you're also dealing with
Yeah,
timing
yeah,
and stuff
exactly.
like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casey has another one.
How do you feel about virtual production? Do you feel in some ways it would give you more creativity in terms of finding a look?
No. I don't know. I mean, like, there's.
Or just how do you feel about virtual production to begin with?
Well, it's like I was saying before. I mean, it's not really something I can relate to in the sense that I don't feel I'm reacting to something that's in front of me. That said, I've worked with people on animation, and I've enjoyed that, but it's a different process. I love live action. I love being in a real space. Okay, it might be a set, but it feels real when you're there with the actors. And I like reacting to something rather than trying to. I don't like imagining things, but we imagine on Blade Runner. We imagine the world we're going to create. But virtual reality. I'm not really. Yeah, I'm probably a creature of my time.
No, there you are. Yes.
I'm Nitin. I'm on a short course for composing. Roger, I wanted to ask, in your earlier career, when maybe you started working with higher budgets for the first time, did you ever experience self-doubt or imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Imposter syndrome.
Like when you
I'm feeling that right now, yeah. No, every day of my life. I think I live in a constant existential crisis. And I'm not joking, but no, I don't. I mean, the first movie I did, on the first day I went round the back of the set to be sick. I feel very stressed out on any movie, especially the first few days. But I got used to it. I mean, it's just part of the.
You surround yourself with a great crew, don't you?
Yeah, which were really supportive, and that makes it feel much more.
Even Connie Hall,
easier.
who was
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
said on the first day of or first week of the set, he would go on the camera because he operated too, and put his eye to the lens because he didn't want to talk to anybody, and they thought he was busy, but he just was nervous.
He was just nervous, and he was just trying to get himself steady while he was thinking about what the day's work was. Yeah, so I mean, he said he never got over being nervous about the shoot, and so that was very reassuring, really.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, I'm Milo. I'm in the directing animation course, and I was wondering, because you come from a place of really liking what's films that are sort of grounded in reality a little bit, what is it that sparks your interest in doing cinematography for animated films?
Well, we were asked, the first time was on Wall-E, and Andrew Stanton wanted Wall-E to feel more like a live action film, because a lot of animation at the time was either doing a big wide angle camera that just wandered around. It wasn't using cuts and camera moves. So he explored how you physically move a live action camera, and what the restrictions and what the methodology is. So that's how we got involved in that, and then went on to, Rango was the same thing, but on that Gore wanted very much filmic lighting. He wanted very specific lighting, and I was more involved in the lighting than actually the shots or anything. And then we worked at DreamWorks, and it just went on from there. I mean, we found it very enjoyable, didn't we? And that being, in collaboration with people. I mean, it's a very different process, but it's the same in terms of storytelling. You're using light and composition in the same way as you would in live action, aren't you? Really,
So you were really bringing a little reality into it.
Bringing
because
that, yeah.
how would the camera actually move? It wouldn't
Yeah.
go through the wall.
Yeah.
How would the light actually interact with the surfaces?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you play this on a static wide shot as opposed to a moving series of close-ups, and you know, that kind of thing. And so it's the same language, it's just a different technology, isn't it, really? I think.
Okay, one from the back and then Zoom. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Hi, James and Roger. Thank you for being here today. My name is Jessica, a production management student. And I'd like to ask about ability and network. Which do you think is more important? And how do you balance these two when you first enter the industry and try to find a job?
Well,
Ability and networking.
Well, we would hope ability was more important, but I think networking is a reality, and it's very helpful. And but I think that you have to be able to do your job, because you can get the job because you're networking. But then if you can't do it, it's not so good.
I don't know. I don't know that I've ever done networking consciously. No, I've
you're
been
not
very
very good
lucky.
at
I
that.
mean, I'm terrible, but I just too nervous, and no, I never do that. No, but I was very lucky because, you know, I was getting film students that had been at the film school offered me a bit of work here and there, and then I met a few people, and then I got offered documentaries, and once I'd done one or two things, it started leading to others, and it just sort of, I didn't really have to do any networking, and I don't do any now, you know, I don't. I mean, I'm here, but I'm not networking.
I think you have to be careful too, because you can network and get a job, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to kind of get out, you know. I don't.
Yeah. Just worry about your ability and your experience in that sense, and I think the rest will come somehow. Because, frankly, if I can make it, you can make it, don't worry.
Katie has another one.
So how important is the look of a film when making a documentary?
When making a documentary? Well, I mean, how important is the look of the film, any film?
Remember the documentary we saw the other day? That look wasn't so good. And
yeah,
it
but
took
I
us
mean,
out of it.
what's
Yeah.
important in a documentary is the filmmaker's relationship to the subject, I think. Now that impacts the look in the sense that whoever's operating the camera, be it the director or a separate camera person, their relationship to the subject, and it not only in terms of where they put the camera, how it moves, but also in the empathy that somehow translates between the operator and the person in front of them is very important. I mean, you can push a camera in somebody's face and have a totally different reaction than to somebody that they feel, if the subject feels comfortable with you and stuff. So the great one example is Now's film.
Tito and the Sisters?
No, the other one. Collective. I don't know if you've seen that. Where there is an obvious empathy with the subject and a confidence. The subject is trusting the filmmaker. Does that impact the look? Yeah. But I mean, whether you're saying that's not the look in terms of how it's lit or more sort of straight technical considerations. It's about the relationship between the filmmakers and the subject. And I think the look of a feature film, it's the same in a way. It's the relationship of the camera to the subject, and the relationship, and again, how do you use a lens? You know, where are you? You know, it's more. It's a harder thing to. I'm obviously finding it a harder thing to describe and explain, but it's a relationship thing. I think a relationship of the operator to the subject, whether it's documentary or feature, is more important than any other aspect of photography, really.
So I always say to the students that your look is inside you. Don't go looking for it. It's you. It's what you bring to the film.
Well, I think it's that instinctive thing, and I think working on documentary, it kind of like it helps you develop that instinct to what's in front of you and what's happening. It's like taking still photographs. You know, it's in a way that it's about how you relate to what you see, isn't it? You know, and it's instinctive.
I have a photography question as well.
Go on.
Should I ask it? How does your love of photography influence your work with moving image, and are there any photographers in particular who've inspired you?
Well, I mean, I think I got into photography and then indirectly into film afterwards, because when I was at art college, one of a guy that came down and was tutor now and again was Roger Main, whose work I loved. There's a load of photographers that inspired me, and some that we've talked to on our podcast, Alex Webb and Harry Greer, and now there's so many. I mean, you could. One of the great photographers is Giorgio Pinkhausen, who used to be the set photographer for Andrei Tarkovsky. So that can't be bad. But his photographs are absolutely brilliant. You know, wonderful. So there's so many though. I could mention hundreds, but
And then how does your photography love and passion?
I think it's just like. Not training your eye, but it's just a way of finding your eye, really. It's just the way you react to things in front of you, and I don't relate the two directly, but obviously it's somehow how you relate to what you see in front of you. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
How do you have to adapt in comparison to working with film? Do you use more light, or is that a different way of working?
In still photography?
No, black and white.
In motion picture?
Yes.
Is there a different way of working in motion picture in black and white?
I kind of think, because in still photography I just work in black and white, really. I kind of think I see in black and white. You know, I think that's, I kind of, the first thing I see is the way light falls on something, not the colours of that thing, I think. And then obviously I like colour, but that's almost comes after I'm looking at the way the light's affecting a space. So in a sense I'm looking at it in a way that's black and white, that simplifies it. And sometimes, quite often I do wish I'd, in this respect, lived in an earlier era where they were shooting more black and white, because I love black and white movies, I love black and white images. I think the danger with colour, it can be just eye candy and distracting. And I think the most successful colour photographers, well, like I said, Pinkhausen or Alex Webb, they're using colour in a really interesting way, and simplifying, and Harry, and then they're simplifying somehow. I think there's few people that can use colour really well.
Yeah, there was a question. There you are. Yes.
I was wondering, maybe it's a broader question, in the sense that you see nowadays there's more and more pictures and more kind of the visual medium is very much emphasized everywhere. And you as a producer of images, I was wondering how you felt about that. And,
Yeah, no, there is. And I think the quality of cinematography and photography is like, I mean, it's kind of amazing now. There's I mean, in one way, there's a lot of competition, isn't there? But I mean, how do I feel about it? I think it's kind of wonderful, but there seems to be something a little generic about things you see now, and that worries me. I find that disappointing. I think there was more in just in terms of image making and the way the camera's used in movies, I think there was more interest in movies. In the maybe in the 70s and 80s than there is now. And there's a few directors, obviously, are using the camera in a very interesting way, and cinematographers, but I think generally movies have become a bit generic, and you tend to always be on the person that's speaking now. It's like they're driven by dialogue, and you know, I find that sad that film doesn't seem to have moved on from the vision of somebody like Andrei Tarkovsky or Sergio Leone. You go all the extremes of the filmmakers of the 60s, 70s, 80s, Kubrick. All that promise of the language of film doesn't seem to have moved on very far to me. Now you have people like Wes Anderson, sure. You have people like Andrei Zvyagintsev, whose name I can never pronounce, but we met in Paris last year, and a wonderful guy, who makes brilliant movies. But I find there are fairly few of them, and I would have expected film to have somehow blossomed into something more interesting and diverse at this point in film's history.
Do you think you've got to a stage where your standards are so high that you're looking down at the rest of them and thinking there's nothing much there? Is that what's happening?
No, I mean, no, I don't think so at all. No, I hope not. Oh dear, I hope not. No, I mean, I love some of
It
what
woke them up a bit anyway.
I love some of the films that we made, but I do feel a lot of, especially the larger films, have become a bit generic.
And darkness. And
they're not using the power of movies.
Yeah.
The fact that you're using visual as well as dialogue and written to tell a story.
Yeah. Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone, when he went down and he looked at the Brooklyn Bridge, nobody had ever shot that way before.
Right.
That's the way that he saw things.
Right.
Yes, I see what you mean.
But Once Upon a Time in America, Good, Bad, and all those. Fistful of dynamite. I mean, the way he used images and sound.
Yes.
And it wasn't dialogue struck. Yeah, I mean, it was something really, okay, people say it was kind of operatic, yeah, but where is the person that's stretching the idea of sound and images like he was?
Yeah.
You know, where is the guy that's making Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia? You know,
yes,
I mean, where is the Peckinpah of today?
Yeah,
You know, I don't know. I don't see that challenge.
This gentleman and then you, gentleman.
A bunch of us have just kind of wrapped up on Grad Fictions, and I think between production directors and cinematographers, I think you'd probably be like, we all go in with a plan, like you've got the storyboard, you've got shot list, inevitably on small scale stuff that we're doing, like we don't have time, we don't have all the money in the world, and whether it's the weather, like shit always hits the fan. When shit hits the fan, if you get any tips for like those teams, how to manage that when you're running out of time in a day, you can't go back to location, when you're doing small scale stuff, if you get any tips to not flap out.
Not really. I'd flap out. Really. No, I mean it's hard. But my thing is always keep it simple. Keep it simple. You know, I think there's always a danger of trying to overcomplicate things, and really, I'm always trying to strip a shot down or a scene down to its basics, so that you have time to shoot it for one, but you have time and to think about it and really.
And maybe it's a chance to say, instead of doing it very linearly, we'll just be on the back of someone's head and do this, you know, to kind of go out of the expected in order to finish the day. But it could be a strength, I think.
Okay. Does that help?
Yeah. No, it's just as James said, I think to try and look at it a different way and make that somehow work for you. I don't know, that's easy to say, isn't it? Oh God.
No, but you're right. There's that great book Eleanor Coppola wrote, and she went to visit Francis Ford Coppola on Apocalypse Now, and went to the AD and said, "Where is he?" And they said, "He's up there on the camera rostrum." And so she climbed up on the camera rostrum, and he was sitting on a box crying. And she said, "What's the matter?" He said, "I don't know what to do next." So we're all in good company. You're in good company.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on the previous topic, and I wanted to ask you who you think is currently the most interesting filmmaker, like DP or director. Who do you think that is?
Andrei Zagintsev, by a long way, and Joel and Ethan, but you
Who
know.
directed Loveless, by the way, in case you can't figure out who he is.
Elena, I thought was my favourite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so coming back to this discussion of images, like, do you come with like references and things when you come to a project, or are you more like, I just want to see locations and come up with my own ideas? Like, how much? Where's this balance of like being influenced by paintings or other photography and finding your own language?
It's more the latter. I mean, I don't often come with images or references. I mean, on Empire Light, first talking with Sam, he was talking about shooting the film in black and white, and I couldn't get my head around that, although I love black and white. And I thought, no. So I showed him a book of Harry Griot images, and he said, "Oh, I see what you say, yeah." So we ended, so those sort of conversations happen, but I rarely actually have a lot of image. We had a lot of image, like I was saying earlier, on Assassination of Jesse James. We all got a lot of images and our own ideas, and Andrew had a load of old Polaroids and things he'd ripped out of magazines, and we all put them together and created a whole palette of the movie. But that doesn't always happen. It's usually reacting.
Yeah, because sometimes people take it so literally too.
Right.
You have to be careful, because if you're just using it as an inspiration,
Right.
and then somebody else from the costume department comes in and says, "Oh, they're wearing that kind of dress," and suddenly that wasn't the point of the reference.
Yeah, because the reference really for mood. It's not for something like I can't remember more than a few occasions where, I've watched a film with the director as a reference for anything. But I remember that when we were doing The Man Who Wasn't There, Joel said, "Think of Shadow of Doubt. Don't watch it, but just think about it," because it was the mood of the film. And I watched it, and obviously Shadow of Doubt and Man Who Wasn't There look very, very different. But they have the same kind of feel of this slightly sleepy California strangeness,
Okay, Casey.
What are the signs you're collaborating with a stronger or maybe weaker director or producer?
Signs?
Well, I think the signs are insecurity when you have an idea and it threatens them. That's not a good sign at all. A good sign is a director or producer who's interested in other people's ideas. That's a really good sign. Who has a sense of humor. That's a good sign for me.
I think a sign of confidence is when somebody is open to other people's ideas and have the confidence to say, "No, I don't want that idea, I have my own," but is open to listen, and I can't see how that could be anything but an advantage to listen to other people and be open to collaboration. But I do think there are, and the producers probably and directors, who feel threatened sometimes by ideas. Yeah.
And also a good sign is if they're concerned about the people that are working for them, because it's a shoot is a long time, and if you start out and you realize they don't care whether you get to sleep, whether you get to do this or that, that's a very bad sign. And do you want to go home?
Right, yes, sir.
My name is Polly, I'm a stop motion animator. And growing up, I would see images of you, Roger, on top of a crane or in the trenches with the light meter, and so it was like quite a surprise when I found out that you did work in CGI. I know you touched on this a bit before, but I was wondering if you could talk about how you managed to like practically get your ideas across without being able to pick up a camera or move a light around. And then also, I was wondering whether you'd ever or would be interested in working in stop motion as a medium where you can still use physical lights and lenses and whatnot.
Well, I mean, yeah, definitely. If it was offered on the latter thing, but I mean, I've worked in animation, yeah. But I mean,
You're able to kind of try different things on the monitor, right?
yeah, it's a different process, but you're still. I mean, a lot of what we were doing actually at DreamWorks was trying to develop the software so we could light with soft light, which for a while you couldn't. You would have to put up multiple lights to try and create a soft light effect, and it was different. And then you wouldn't have secondary bounce, so we, a third, like light bounces off something and then bounces off that and bounces off that, and the technology wasn't there for it, or the software wasn't there for it. So there was all those things. But I mean, as I said earlier, I think here that it's the same language as you just using different tools to create a shot and a camera move and a light that expresses something, adds something to the storytelling. I mean.
And also, could you please convince the Coen brothers to make a stop motion film that you shoot?
Probably make what? Sorry?
Convince
So
the
could you
boys.
please convince the Coen brothers to produce a stop motion film that you shoot?
Stop motion film.
I'm not sure that we could.
I don't know. Not if I could convince them of anything. But yeah, no. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. James, I was going to ask, what was it like when you started in the industry as a script supervisor? Like, did you get shoved into doing it, or did you just sort of work into it normally?
When I started out, I wanted to ask people questions, and nobody would help me, which is one of the reasons why I want to help as many people as I can, because I swore to myself at that point, because there's only one script on the set, so you can't start as a third script. You have to go in and know everything, and God help me, those first ones that I did, I feel bad for the people that, I probably did it for no money though, so it serves them right. But I think it was a different time, and it's funny when I hear nowadays how someone's very upset because someone said something mean to them on the set, and I'm remembering the early days when directors would scream, and it was a lot rougher when I was starting out at any rate. So it's always tough, I think, to start.
Yes. Yes, you.
That's interesting, because when we first graded the first one in HDR, I think the software was different, and so it couldn't handle as much, and unfortunately it was Blade Runner, so there was like really bright highlights and really dark, a dark room, so it was very difficult, and it wasn't our favorite thing to do.
No, it took a lot of manipulating to get anywhere near where we wanted it to be.
But then when we did 1917, we were not looking forward to that.
Yeah, HDR now is great.
Yeah,
I mean,
but it turned out
works.
great,
Yeah. But I mean, in terms of timing, well, you said how we work with the time?
Well,
sit there every day and go through every shot. I mean,
tell them what you want.
I mean, it's we're there all the time. And when we used to be away on another movie, then they used to have a remote system that they could bring and set up a little timing suite, so that at the end of the day shoot, we would go off and start timing. But I don't like working in a way where the timer does timing that I'm not involved in. So I have to be there doing each shot. Yeah, I'm very hands-on.
Okay, question over here first.
So you spoke about the importance of relationships when you're working on any film, be it with the subject or the director. What's the difference in how you've arrived at your visual style through this relationship when you're, say, working on a small indie film as opposed to some of the bigger films?
I don't think it's any
Kind of the
different,
same,
really.
yeah.
I mean, why? I mean, I think I was saying earlier, or maybe earlier in the day, I don't feel any different working on a bigger film to a smaller film, other than that sometimes there's more pressure from, or feels like more pressure from a studio or a production for a certain thing. But I don't feel I change at all. And but we're basically working with the same team of people, so we just carry on.
I think sometimes maybe one of the differences could be that on a bigger film, there's more pressure on the director, and it's a little bit harder to get to them because there could be producers on set, there could be other people on set, and you need to talk to them between takes just to question something, and that becomes a little bit harder than on a small film. But other than that, we're operating in the same way.
Yeah, small film, it's true, isn't it? Everything kind of condenses into a much more personal sort of experience, really, which is what I love about it. But
Do you find working on a personal film more satisfying, a smaller film more satisfying?
well, I don't know about more satisfying. It is in sort of that way, but on the other hand, you know, it's great to have a canvas and all the rest. So, you know, satisfying, it's hard to quantify, really. I love it all. I ideally I would, you know, swing between the small film and a large film or whatever, and have much more, you know, variation in what I did, really.
There was a question over here, wasn't there? Was that? Yes, sorry, you. Yeah.
Hi, Roger. Thank you for coming. I just got a quick question. You mentioned about your reaction on set during the shooting. Have you ever encountered a situation like the actors improvising? And what's your idea on the relationship between the cinematographer to actor? It's kind of a weird question, but do you have any thought on that?
Yeah, but I mean, I think, no, I mean, I think, well, then you go back to the sort of documentary kind of way of working, you know, it's, you're reactive to something, what happens. I mean, I think there was a lot of improvisation, I suppose, on Sid and Nancy, for one. I mean, and then the way we shot Jarhead was totally documentary style, in that we started shooting rehearsals. You know, we didn't rehearse without the camera. We rehearsed with the camera and shot, and then we would think about the way we covered it and what the actors had done, and then we talked about what we would do in the next take, and it sort of built it like that.
But I think also it depends on the relationship that you have with the actor, but you can say to the actor, you want to give them as much space and room as they need, but you can also say, but whatever you do, don't go over there. Or, you know, if you have that relationship, because if there's something that just wouldn't work.
Sometimes they've been, I mean, it's partly why I love operating, because I'm reacting to what's there, and it's like my responsibility. I'm not sort of asking an operator to do something, and especially if actors are improvising, it's my relationship to it. And there's been a number of occasions where we've been running a camera and it's obvious the actor is doing something and it's gone past the last line of dialogue, and somebody shouts cut, but you don't cut the camera because you kind of know that that actor is actually doing something that is valuable, which is improvisation in a way, isn't it, you know? Yeah, I mean, I like that reacting. I think that in the same way that we say, well, we don't like to be really tied to a storyboard, why should an actor be tied to doing exactly the blocking that he did in the last take? I mean, I know there's the whole continuity thing, and but you know, but I mean, I think you've got everybody. It's nice that everybody has a bit of freedom to improvise, and you know.
And then there's Bruce Willis, who answers the questions in close-up that were never asked. When you shot the other way.
Sometimes it's a bit extreme, isn't it? Yeah. No, but, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, we've only got 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. Next one, yes. The mic's coming over. Shout down.
Hi guys. So I just wanted to ask or learn a little bit more about your collaboration between Roger and James. So how in pre-production, how much input, James, are you allowed to give? Or yeah, just how that creativity is. So yeah, if you guys give each other input creatively.
Very
yes.
much so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly we do. I mean, maybe not so much, in the office and talking, with a director about things sometimes, but maybe it's much more when we're together.
Yeah, I mean, Roger will be in Blade Runner. There's a circular lighting rig, and he was trying to figure it out and at 2:00 in the morning woke up and said, "I know how to do it. I know how to do it." So
That's
with
our
its 10Ks
collaboration.
and,
Yeah, no.
right, and it's like, good. That sounds really great. That sounds good. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really good to have a sounding board, because I think Roger can say to me, well, what if I do this and what if I do that, and I can say what I think he's going to do, what he wants to do. But it's just having that sounding board is good.
Yeah.
And that's why you're a team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and also you really want someone to have your back.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
Exactly.
Yeah.
on the side.
Was there another question up there? The last question.
Hiya, my name's Owen. I'm studying location sound here. I want to know, do we ever get on your nerves? And also, what do you really value in your location team during production? And how do we not get on your nerves?
No, I think sometimes
How honest are you going to be?
No, everybody's trying to do the best they can. But sometimes I feel, as an operator, boxed in by a boom. And when a sound recordist has got radio mics on all the actors and then got fixed mics all around the set, and then they've got 2 booms hanging over the frame as well, I sometimes think that's a bit too much. And if an actor, like we were saying, if an actor's improvising something and doing some moves that I don't know are going to happen, and a boom swinger doesn't know, and there's the boom, and when they say that's all right, it can be taken out in post, it really makes me annoyed, because that is so sloppy. I don't want anything to have to be taken out in post.
But you know how I talk a lot to visual effects. I talk a lot to
Oh,
the
yeah.
sound people. I like the sound people, and
Yeah.
I know what they're up against.
We do like sound people.
Yeah. And so I try and find what the solution is. If I know that Roger's being driven crazy by certain mics, I ask them, is there another way, because as opposed to barking at them. Because everybody's trying to do their own
Yeah, everybody's
stuff,
to you to understand. It's all give and take.
And
But,
we work a lot with Stuart, and Stuart will go for
Yeah,
everything.
Stuart. Yeah,
He'll go
yeah,
for
yeah.
everything, but good for him, because then he gets
Yeah.
less, but he gets what he needs.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's always a trade-off, and not the sound recordist doesn't always know the cinematographer's problems, and the cinematographer doesn't always know the sound recordist's problems. So you've got to understand what each person needs and where the issue is.
It's nice when they watch the rehearsal, though, isn't it?
When they're allowed to, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it works both ways. Listen, that's it. I'm afraid. Would you come back and do it again sometime?
Yeah.
Sure.
We won't say the same things.
Okay. I think we're going to have a photograph, and but let's have a round of applause.